to Celtic State of Mind. My name is Laura Bradburn and I am joined on this Friday by Jim Orr, although we can't see him there. Kelvin, if you're in the background, if you can maybe try help Jim out there, that'd be grand. And I'm joined as always, well, not as always, for a change today, by Russell Boyce. How you doing, Russell?
Oh, I'm good. Everyone will be sick of the sight of me now, Laura. That's me been on about 14 times this week, you know what I mean? But
I hear you're after my job.
Yeah, well, there's a wee bit of truth in that, maybe. But no, just I'm a bit of a glory hunter, you know what I mean? So we won a few awards. I thought, better get on the after show, you know what I mean, to smugly smile into the camera.
Well, exactly. First things first, for anybody that doesn't know, you are watching a double award winning, a triple award winning, if you like. We got 2 golds and a bronze at last night's Football Content Awards in London. Paul, Tony and Lawrence were down there to represent the whole team, and we picked up 3 gongs, as you might have seen on our socials. So first thing I want to say to everybody watching this, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you're watching this, thank you so much. It's your votes that won us that award. It's your votes that mean that we are able to celebrate this way that we have done, and it's you watching this that lets us do what we love to do. Jim, you're back with us. We can see and hear you, hopefully. How you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
can do.
10 times better, mate.
Okay, good.
Clear as a bell, clear as a bell. But Russell,
Good.
I'll come to you first. What was your reaction to last night and the news filtering through? I had the live feed on with the awards ceremony coming through, and it was a bit crazy, really, just watching it all come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were up for 3. You would have took 1, you know, before the ball was kicked. You would have accepted. If we won 1, I thought that would be one heck of an achievement. You only need to look at the other sort of clubs and all that are sort of we were in competition with, that have their own sort of fan media platforms and stuff. So, yeah, we were in tough competition, but we shone through. The fans made their voices heard. I'm extremely grateful as well. I mean, at the time, I was like kind of like buzzing, shaking sort of way when we won the first one. And then the second one just seemed to come, you know, like Celtic conceded a second goal in Europe, right on the back of it. It was just, it was right away. So it was quite hard to process exactly what was happening. But I think as the night went on and you've seen who else is winning awards, you've seen like Sky Sports winning awards and things like that, you realise the scale and the enormity of what's been achieved. And, you know, just a big thanks to everyone in the team who's contributed. We all have our differences in the WhatsApp group chat, etc., and difference of opinion, but that's what makes a great show that can last, over 7 days a lot of the time when you take into consideration the match fixtures and stuff and the coverage we do for those. So, you know, to try and put out content on a daily basis isn't easy, and if we all agreed on everything, it would be a very boring world. So, no, I think it's a great reflection on the team, and obviously a special mention to Paul, who's obviously pulled all this together and managed to orchestrate it, you know, for the past 12 months in such a strong manner.
Yeah, Paul is somewhere on a train between here and London, I believe, so that's why he's not with us today. But yeah, he's the man who started it all. I believe him and Kevin Graham started it in their kitchen, and it's gone from there to a roster of, 15 odd contributors, something like that. 7 days a week, pretty much giving out content, so it's been crazy. Jim, what did you make? What was your reaction to the awards coming in and your reflections on it, in terms of where the podcast is?
Yeah, I was actually playing football last night. I got home about 10:30 and switched on the phone. There was like 85 messages or something like that. I know how that kind of churns away, and it was all yas and swear word, yes, and so I thought this must be not a bad night for the guys, and then just took my time to kind of scroll through it, and yeah, phenomenal achievement. I mean, this is all down to Paul John Dykes. This was his vision. This was his baby. He took an idea and he built it into something that thousands of people get a great deal of enjoyment out of, and don't underestimate the thousands of hours that he puts in. I mean, I think we play a very, very small part in this. This will survive without us, but Paul John, he's the main man. I mean, you threw to Dalkeith, 6-7 days a week. It's like pulling in 12-hour days in there. When I first heard of a Celtic State, I mean, I just thought, what a fantastic name. I think it's got a few unique selling points, and that's certainly one of them. What is a podcast about? Something to give your opinions on and your views on, and what do you think? Speak your mind. It's about Celtic. So it's kind of It does what it says in the tin. And obviously there's thousands of podcasts out there. So what differentiates, I think, a Celtic State of Mind, one of the things is the name. Because when you look at other podcasts, other Celtic podcasts, Boyce and Tim's and Celts and all that kind of stuff, but we're fine, absolutely fine. But I think it's a very powerful message, a Celtic State of Mind. The other thing I think it separates from the other ones is the amount that's on it, just the sheer volume of things that's on it. As you said, Russell, 6-7 days a week of content. You said, Laura, 15, maybe 16 different people involved in this. A sheer range of people involved, because again, I don't tend to watch many podcasts, but the ones I do tend to be, it's the same maybe 2, 3, 4 people that are on all the time. And the other thing I think is very good is actually the diversity of the people who are on it. So if you go from the kind of the very young, intelligent, articulate Amy Canavans and Declan McConville's to maybe the other side of the scale, where people who have seen a lot of things are on it as well. So I think it's tremendous recognition for the hard work that Paul has done over a number of years, and to be recognised by the top people in the game in the UK, I think it's quite phenomenal. And I think no doubt Paul will build on that over the next year, because you have to keep changing and moving, shaking up the menu and whatever. So I think things might be different in 12 months' time, but hopefully, again, they're up for a few more awards. And in fact, I was surprised at the award that we didn't get, which I thought was the one we're most likely to get, was one about the best charity award. I thought maybe that was maybe the favourite of the three. And then when I was scrolling through the things, and I thought, well, I've won the first two, I could definitely win the third one, surely. And but maybe that would have been an unpopular choice to maybe scoop all these awards. But a phenomenal effort, and it's all down to Paul John Dykes, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was delighted with the two awards. The best charitable awards, my personal opinion on that was, if there was one that, any of the contributors deserved to win, it was that one. Yeah, I think it was Gunners versus Cancer that won the gold one, and there's lots of great work being done by lots of different clubs. So great to even just be included in that. Russell, I don't tend to like blow our own trumpet, but if we can't do it on a day like today, when can we do it? I think the feedback that I've been getting from people is, it's no coincidence that we grew as much as we did as a channel and as a podcast during lockdown, during COVID, the pandemic, and a time when everybody was stuck in their houses. People have given the feedback to me that it's a bit like when you can't go to the pub and have a chat with your mates about the game. This is, while not exactly the same, it's a good enough substitute until that returns. Is that kind of the vibe that you've got from it, that you feel it's given you?
I think that the beauty of the Bulletin has been the fact that each show kind of takes on its own entity. Like, on a Thursday, for example, I love a Thursday show because there's going to be one trip at least down memory lane with JP from like a European adventure he's been on and stuff that you're not getting on the other 4 days. It's going to be a wee bit more feisty maybe on a Monday with me and Tony, because it's usually on the back of a bad result. Well, the past 12 months anyway. I think since I started doing this, we've still only won 4 times, I think, on a Sunday or something. It's mad. So yeah, I think each day's got its own identity, and that's what's kept it fresh and vibrant. I agree with what Jim says. Obviously, that needs to carry on happening. Conversation down a pub style, I think there is a bit of that. I think because when you've got a completely different demographic of contributors, that makes them all relatable to the viewers, because, for every older, viewer watching it who can relate to Jim, there'll be someone who's at uni right now that can relate to Declan. Do you know what I mean? There'll be someone who wears Adidas tracky tops that probably still can't relate to me. It's just the way it goes. So I think that they've got a good variation on it. I think as well with the podcast getting the respect that it deserves, I think that'll encourage Paul to, look at the fully produced shows that he's been doing, like the retrospective, Scream of Celica, things like that are all, remember, branch-offs of ACSOM, which is quite remarkable when you think about we're now doing fully produced shows with ex-Celtic players and, Scream of Celica, more sort of fun and trips down memory lane with that, with music tied in. But they're all branch-offs of what essentially is, a bulletin of three volunteers talking about Celtic. You can't beat it.
No, you definitely can't beat it.
I think in terms of Laura, sorry, just in terms of that question you posed about, is it similar to your mates down the pub? It all depends on your mates. So I think in terms of the matchday bulletins, they're extremely good. I think virtually every Celtic fan I know, which not that many, will all tune into ACSOM before the game, during the game, and after the game. And the more people I speak to, that's what they say as well. Whether they're watching the game in Sky or the Path to Paradise, or they're at the games themselves, before, during, and after, because they just like to hear other Celtic fans talk about Celtic. And then I think, there's also a wee bit of it when you listen to maybe the kind of mainstream radio stations, you get a wee bit annoyed at some of the kind of content of them. And it's certainly good and refreshing, I think, when you get to hear fellow Celtic fans talk about Celtic. And it's not all sugar-coated as well. And I think there's usually a pretty good balance between, not going over the top when things are, good or things are bad. So, it's been really good.
It has been absolutely great. And Jim, just to pick up on that point, talking about sugar-coating and positives and negatives, I think the great thing, like what you were saying about the 85 messages that came through, it was really obvious that we were seeing the positive side of things last night. Too often we focus on the negatives of being online and being on social media, but last night really brought out the positive side of being on this podcast and seeing how many followers we have that really enjoy what we do, didn't it?
I mean, don't underestimate the achievement. You said the competition was in there, and there are thousands and thousands of podcasts out there. And even if you were the best podcast in Dalkeith, that would be good, but you've actually taken on, international podcasts and won. And it's a huge, huge achievement for Paul John. It's astonishing. And you can milk that for all it's worth, because, to have actually won something in that competition, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. If I'm not mistaken, I think Open Goal were in one of the categories that we were in, and obviously they're not long having just sold out the Hydro, so that's the kind of scale of podcasts that we're up against, and it's thanks to everybody watching this podcast that picked up their phones and I was going to say called in and voted for us. That's a child of the 90s talking. Went online and voted for us.
I think also, Laura, when you see the amount of money that's behind some of these other podcasts, it's a lot of money getting poured into other podcasts who didn't win. And it's that kind of David and Goliath kind of, the kind of underdog that's kind of came to the fore. So Mr. Dykes will have to run very fast to keep that going. So that's a Pepsi challenge for next year, I think.
It is indeed. Who knows? Ange will have a job to do to achieve more in his next 12 months than Paul John Dykes already has. So we'll see where it goes. Chris Fraser on YouTube says Paul John Dykes is a legend. He absolutely is. Paddy Lavery on YouTube says, when's the Open Top Bus Tour? I don't know when the Open Top Bus Tour is, but I know who's going to be driving the bus, that's for sure. But enough of this patting ourselves in the back. I'm sure you're all fed up hearing it and you want to get back to talking about things that are more important, like Celtic, which is what we're here to do. So obviously we've got the return to action after the international break. We're facing Motherwell at Fir Park this weekend. Before we get on to looking at the game itself, Russell, what kind of a position do you feel we're in? We were worried before the international break that we might have the bad fortune that we've had previously and have people come back with injuries and stuff. We look as if we're coming back, relatively unscathed, even considering we had Rogic and Furuhashi playing against each other. So what do you make of the position that we're in now? Do you think we're coming back kind of as strong as we were before the international break?
I think if anything we're a wee bit stronger, because I think the players that didn't go away for the international break have had that extra time to sort of get used to Ange's style of football. He's maybe been able to work a wee bit more intensely with those players as well. We were talking yesterday about it was a shame Liam Scales missed out on that opportunity because we know Ange didn't feel he was quite ready yet, but that's one of those things. But I certainly think now, with players coming back to fitness, other players having now an extra week or two to get up to speed and work with Ange closer, then obviously, as you rightfully point out, it seems that we've came back for the players that were on international duty seem to have came back without any injuries at all to report. So for me, the squad's now looking as close to, minus Julian, as strong as what we could expect it to be at this stage, having only done one window. I don't particularly think it's as weak a squad as people make out either, if I'm honest to you. I think with all the players that, when you actually get everyone available for selection, I think the competition is quite healthy in a lot of areas of the park. And, I think whilst, there's doubt about the midfield position right now, I'm sure we'll come to all these things anyway, but I actually happen to think, this time last year we were crying out for Sorrow to play, and he impressed this time last year. And I think there's still a player in there somewhere. I just think he's just a bit of a headless chicken now. But I think James McCarthy coming in, I think, again, a lot of people would have been quite for that if you can get him fit. He's had another 2 weeks now at it, working under Ange. I don't think he was away on international duty, was he?
No, I don't think so, no.
Don't think he was. So if he's had another 2 weeks in his legs, hopefully he's going to be looking more up to speed. Again, I think he'd be an option we would have seen as quite attractive, a year ago. So I think in all areas of the park we have strengthened to an extent. I'm not saying by any stretch it's the finished article, the squad, but I certainly think now that everyone's getting back to full fitness, it's time to capitalise on that and let's see what we're made of.
It's an interesting point, Jim. Is it something you agree with Russell there? I mean, I think we've been so used to over the past year saying that the squad's depleted, we need a clear out, we need more numbers. But actually, when you look at it on paper, as Russell says, if we can get everybody back fit, there are plenty of choices there.
I think Ange has been dead unlucky with injuries at the start of the season, lots of players out, and so you can maybe kind of hide behind that a wee bit. If Juranovic is back and if Forrest is back and if Julian is close to being back, and if nobody comes back for the international break with any injuries, I think we've won a watch and we've got a kind of chance to move on. It's a huge game tomorrow, massive game. So I feel I said last week, after the United game, I was fairly upbeat, even though we dropped points because I thought we played well. Against Bayer, I thought we was fairly upbeat because I thought we played good in parts of the game. But after Aberdeen, I was quite concerned because I thought we were lucky, and the people use that phrase "win ugly," which I don't like. I don't think it makes any sense. I think you win lucky. I think at Aberdeen a couple of weeks ago we were lucky. The game could have went either way, and we just managed to sneak it. So that was a concern because I've also said in previous podcasts that when you take the sum of, if you add up the individual players, for me they're kind of less than the sum of the parts.
Mm.
So I'm now kind of getting into the kind of phase of starting to question Ange a wee bit. I don't blame him for this season, don't get me wrong. I mean, we are here because of law and this dysfunctional board, and if we don't win the league, it's their fault. But he's been thrown in there. He's now got, a squad of, there's a lot of international players in there, talented players and guys to come back. So I'm now looking at him to see who he's picking for the games and who's playing where. And if he's got a bigger choice now, I think we maybe start to maybe be able to question Ange, because when he first jumped in, nobody, so Neil Beaton gets sent off against Midtjylland, 19-year-old kid who had never heard of what's on the park, so now we've got players, who should be able to do a job, and if they're not contributing, they're out, we get somebody else in. So I think it's a huge game for Ange tomorrow, and if he has got more people to choose from, it'll be interesting to see who he picks tomorrow.
I think that's the thing that sort of gets folk up for the game or dejected before it even starts quite often, Russell, is when they see the lineup. They either totally agree with changes that have been made or start to question them. And I think that is, for all that we want to be behind Ange and the style that he's trying to play, there have certainly been occasions where, regardless of the position he's in, as Jim says, and the hand of luck he's been dealt, there have been times where his selection has been the problem, and that is down to him.
No, absolutely, of course. And the thing is as well, there's always going to be debates when, the lineups, announced in the formation. We see that and we'll go, oh, I don't agree with that. But sometimes that can be a good thing because it means the competition's healthy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be, oh, that was staring you in the face, or why is Kyogo out wide left, for example, or something like that, at Ibrox. Those are frustrating ones, but you knew his options were still limited at that time. So perhaps, like Jim says, he got more of a free pass at that point. But I think with all the players coming back now, the onus will be on him. I'm not saying all the tools that he would have liked. I'm not going to suggest that, and he certainly doesn't have the staff around him. But I certainly think as a pool of players, he's the envy of Scotland right now, bar perhaps the Rangers squad, which I don't think there's much between them man for man, although albeit they've got the title and they would rightfully say theirs is better than ours. Fair enough. But I certainly don't think there's a huge gap in terms of the quality between the two squads right now. And it's now up to Ange how he utilises his tools. So I'm not saying that putting pressure on him either. It may well be he will go on a fantastic run of results right now and say, I told you, once I got all the players back and once I had the tools and once I had a wee bit of time to work with them, it'll come off. So it's not like this is keep pressure on him and say, oh, you've got all the tools, make it work right now, straight away. I just think that the competition we've got right now is healthier than it's been all season. He's had now, 3 months since he took over, something like that. He's had a wee, it's a more considerable period now. And like I was saying yesterday, we've got 5 domestic games before the next international fixture. It'll be very intriguing to see if we can pick up a far higher point percentage in those 5 games than what we did in the opening segment of the SPFL season.
I'm just thinking about what you said there. He's officially lasted longer than Don Mackay now, so that's one thing, and he's one feather in his cap. Just before I come back to Jim, Russell, I just wanted to raise this to you. It's a comment from Brian Watt on YouTube, and remember everybody, you can comment on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you are watching. We just happen to see the YouTube comments most often because those are the ones that are in the highest volume. But Russell, Brian Watt says Soro just doesn't seem like he's suited to a team who dominate possession because he's not good enough on the ball. He's primarily a ball winner, and he seems to have even regressed in that. I just wanted to raise that to you because you'd mentioned Soro before. We've gone from wanting him in the team to kind of wanting any other option. What do you think is the main reason for that kind of change in attitude towards Soro?
Well, to steal a phrase that Jim would use, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. That Soro's performances have maybe slightly regressed, but not to the level people are saying. I certainly think he can handle us dominating the ball. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that'll be a problem. I actually think at times his passing can look quite direct, quite crisp. Other times I think it's actually off the ball that he's causing me more concern of late. Has been when he's been chasing down guys in areas that are not really a threat. We'll be just inside our own half, for example, and he'll be clipping at someone's heels, harassing them. And I'm all for putting pressure on whoever's got the ball, but there doesn't need to always be contact. Do you know what I mean? There's a slight difference there. I don't think what Soro's shown me is he's eager, he's enthusiastic. He definitely can make a tackle when it's needed, but he's not streetwise. And that's something he needs to learn. He needs to get streetwise. But as for being on the ball, I've not really got any concerns. I would kind of slightly disagree with that. I know we're on a day of positivity, so I don't want to disagree with any of yours, but I happen to think his ball retention would be the least of my worries. It's knowing when to make a tackle and knowing when to just shadow a player and keep them under pressure, because I think he's got bags of energy. I think he certainly could suit a pressing game, easy peasy. It's just knowing when to time your runs, knowing when to, as I say, put your foot in and when not to. Right now he seems to be prone to putting his foot in at every single, whether it's a 50-50, a 30-70, a 10-90, you name it. He's putting his foot in there, as long as he's got a tiny chance of winning that ball. And I think with experience, with age, and, the longer he is at Celtic, then hopefully we can get that ironed out. Because I do still think I've seen too many positives from him last season, particularly in the latter half of 2020, that gave me too much encouragement for me to give up on him just quite yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I have to say I'm more on your side of things than Brian's. And again, Brian, thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. We mean no harm, but yeah.
Thanks for voting, Brian.
Jim, what's your thoughts on it? Are you more on Brian's side of things? Do you think that Soro is a better ball player, a better ball winner, and that his on the ball play is poorer, or are you with Russell and see it more the other way around?
I think for answer that, just to follow up a point that Russell made there about the big chap being under pressure. Big chap's under a lot of pressure, and you saw that at the end of the Aberdeen game. You saw that in his face, you saw that in his body language with the fist pumps. He knows he's under pressure, and I think the Aberdeen game, just to kind of hark back to that, was maybe the Livingston game as well, is that you could point to the United game and point to the Bayern game and say, you know what, we actually played well there, unlucky. The Aberdeen game, there was nothing to look at to say that's my kind of football, and he knew he got out of jail there. So he's under pressure. He knows that. As far as Soro's concerned, I don't think Soro is good enough to be in the starting 11. he's somebody who you want to bring on to try and kind of shore up a game, but because, as Russell said, he's not particularly streetwise. So would you bring him on to shore up a game? I'm not so sure you would do that either. So for me, I'm not exactly sure where Sorrow fits into the greater scheme of things. I think we should have better players than Sorrow. McCarthy should be a better player than Sorrow. He hasn't shown it yet. But given his what he's done in the game, one would imagine that he's a better option than Sorrow. I think Beaton is a better option than Sorrow. I actually think that if Beaton hadn't got sent off against Midtjylland, I think Beaton would be our centre-back just now. I think the fact that he let us down that game, Ange kind of thought, I can't depend on this guy, because I think he's a kind of Ange-type player. Big guy, likes a pass, knows what he's doing, looks quite composed, makes daft mistakes. So then once you start making daft mistakes, we can't depend on you anymore. Ibrox last year, Midtjylland there. But I think if he had done okay, I think he's the type of player that would have played. I don't mind him in midfield. But I thought with Ange, it was all about a style of play. So do you vary that from home to away matches? Does that make it different then? I'm not so sure. Because from what I thought there was an Ange way of playing. So do you play that all the time? You know, we're playing Motherwell tomorrow. They've made a good start to the season. They'll be quite confident. They'll be thinking we're there for the taking. I think it could be quite an open, expansive game. Would you go there and play Beaton in the midfield? Or would you go there and play your kind of attacking, 4-3-3 that he's always been playing? So it's a conundrum. I mean, in terms of the question that you've posed about Sorrow, I don't see Sorrow in the first 11, and I'm not even sure whether I'd bring Sorrow on. Or under what circumstances would actually bring on Sorrow. So it's a kind of strange one for me, Sorrow. He was great last year. The last second half of the season, he was very, very good, but he seems to have run backwards at an alarming rate of knots, and he needs to be streetwise, as Russell said. Maybe needs to be mentored. That's one of the things I said. Maybe if Scott Brown had stayed, I wasn't looking for Scott Brown to make a big contribution on the park, but I think off the park he could have made a big contribution amongst the players, the new players coming in, helping Ange, that kind of stuff. But hey, that's going.
Jim, would you consider then, just based on what you said there about Sorrow, would you consider loaning him out in January to another SPFL side?
Aye, definitely, Russell. Yeah, definitely. Aye. I think you want. From my point of view, if I was picking a team, I'd be looking for your best. Is it 5 in the bench these days, or is it 8 in the bench?
7. Is it
7?
9?
Is it
7 or 9?
Let's call it 9. Like, you want your best 20 players, and that's your best 20 players, that you'll be able to call on them under any circumstances. And if you've got people on the bench who you're not that confident about, and just harking back to the United game there, when people were wanting Eden Moffat on, get a young boy on. Young boy's never played a competitive game before, so do you risk putting him on? So I want, whether it is 19, 20 players who you're confident at any point in time, they'll go on the pitch and they'll make a contribution. And we haven't had that this season at all. We're miles away from that. But as Russell said earlier, with the guys coming back, you're maybe getting to that 17, 18, 19 players who you can think, I don't mind who comes on. They'll do a job for us. Whereas we've had too many match day squads, you're thinking, well, those 4 won't get on. I can't see why we'd bring those 4 guys on, maybe those 2 or 3, and we've nothing up front. So things are getting a wee bit better. And I think now's a chance to assess Ange in terms of, the team he picks, and then once he's picked the team, how good he is with the subs, who he puts on, when he puts them on. So I think this is an interesting phase for Ange starting tomorrow, because we've dropped points.
Very much.
Every game is a must-win game, and we can't drop points. And Russell made the point about we're in the next 5 games. What would be acceptable? 15 points. 15 points is acceptable. Maybe drop a couple of points at Hibs because they're playing really well. But any less than 13, we can forget it, I think. Unless our major rivals continue to ship points. That keeps us in it. But we can't keep looking for them to do us favours. We have to try and take a bit of ownership with this, and we have to go on a good run, and we have to get that kind of tougher mental strength, which will only come by having longer runs. And that's what makes tomorrow's game fascinating, vital, dead exciting. So
it really does make it exciting, as it always is. I think to get back after the international break, I'm always excited to get back and watch Celtic play, and especially when we're on the cusp of hopefully going on a good run, if the last couple of games before the international break are to go by. before we go into Four Trebles, Kelvin just brought up that comment from Four Trebles saying McCarthy needs to up his game, but we'll talk about that in a second. Russell, I just wanted to bring up the point that Jim made about you've obviously been, a very vocal proponent of Ange adapting, changing his game when necessary, making necessary changes and not being too stubborn in his philosophy. As Jim says there, you wonder whether changing his game away, home and away is something he already does, or whether this philosophy that he's got is something that's rigid to home and away games. What are your thoughts from having watched the team so far? Do you see a difference in the way that we play home and away, or do you think it is very much the same philosophy regardless?
I thought it was very much the same philosophy regardless until Pittodrie, and the inclusion of Near Beaton, I felt put paid to that. I think as Jim says, I think Ange, you could tell by his reaction after the game, it was a man who was releasing some of the pressure that he'd felt under before kickoff. He knew he'd got a late goal, and he showed just. I don't mind that, by the way. He's entitled to do that. He's earned his wages that week. He was pumped up for it. Fair enough. We would never criticise a manager for that, but I thought it showed he adapted slightly when he did the Beaton inclusion, and I think it was because it needs must. The thing is for me with Ange's philosophy that's he's up against it in a way. Not because I disagree with the philosophy, not because I disagree with his style of football. Never have I said anything like that. But he's up against it because the opposition have won. I was here on the radio the other day. They've won 23 of their last 24 games at home in the league, and they've drawn the other one. It's just staggering that if that's the level of opposition you're against for the title. And it's just realising quickly that when you're dropping points, you're going to get punished. You are going to get punished, unfortunately, a lot of the time. So I just think when you've not got any of your own backroom staff and you're trying to convey this message almost on a solo mission, because you're obviously trying to explain it to Kennedy and Strachan as well for them to help convey it, but it's new to them. So I just feel like he's up against it and trying to get that message, sort of across to the players like that. I think there has to be a bit of patience with that. For me, it would have been substance after being 25 points behind last year and 40 million at stake this year. I would always go substance and then add your style after. Get points on the board, get credit in the bank, and then let's see your philosophy once you've got everyone buying into you. And that's not just the players, that's the fans as well. But I think right now, I think my honest opinion was he maybe just got it a wee bit the wrong way around. And I felt at Pittodrie, I'm not saying he made wholesale changes or anything like that, but the inclusion of Beaton was very much, you put a line under that and you went, that is the key change he's made to the midfield. He has given it balance that there wasn't before. Colin made a great point. He went, he's picked a 6, an 8 and a 10 today instead of 2 10s and a 6, and that was the difference. And it gave us so much more balance. And even though we were under the cosh second half, now I joked at the start of the show, when we concede 1, we concede 2. We conceded 1, yes, at Pittodrie, but I don't think we were going to concede 2. I know we were under it for a bit, and I get what Jim says. He doesn't like the term winning ugly. There was another stat about the other team's title win last season in the second half of the season, and it was the number of 1-0s that they won after New Year to the end of the season. I can't remember the number, but the only thing I would push back on is it's not lucky when it happens that many times. And I think results like Pittodrie could sometimes be a good habit to get in when you know you're under the cosh, but you can still win games when you're not playing well. I feel it's the first time we've shown that. I think other times when we've not played well, we've kind of crumbled. Whereas I think that'll give them strength and more resolve. By all means, I want us to play like that. No, I'm not saying that. And like that second half display was not good enough, but it will give them a source of belief, and it will give them now a point that they can look back to and go, well, remember when we didn't play well before? We dug out a result then. Let's do it again. So hopefully it's just brought on a mentality shift. That's what I'm hoping for.
A mentality shift is certainly what will be required. And I think that's something we'll come on to talk about when we get to the opposition that we're facing at the weekend. But before we do that, just want to say thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you for those who have subscribed. If you haven't done already, then please go onto our YouTube channel and subscribe to A State of Mind, where we've got football content, we've got other content, including music and other chat that's on there. We're always trying to expand, as Jim says, shaking things up and bringing you new content every single week to try and make sure that we keep this community growing so that we can have more nights like last night, which is all down to you for giving us those votes, for making for giving us some form of recognition for the work that us, and more importantly Paul John, has put in to build up this platform that we all enjoy being a part of. Jim, I'll come to you. Motherwell, do you think they pose as a problem? Obviously independent of the fact that we kind of don't know what kind of team is going to come out for us every week. What do you see in Motherwell that might cause us particular issues at the weekend? Well,
they can't be any worse than Aberdeen. So I think we're facing a far tougher team tomorrow than we did up at Pitoje. They made a good start to the season. They're a point ahead of us. Graham Alexander's doing a half-decent job there. They'll lose their confidence. I said earlier, they'll fancy their chances tomorrow. They'll think, this is a good time to get us. We're still not firing all cylinders. It's an away game as well. It could be one of those kind of Ange roller coaster games. If it is an open, expansive game, then there could be lots of goals tomorrow. Hopefully we go and we play well and we win well. But I think it'll be a tough game tomorrow. And because of the added pressure of you can't afford another slip, that just adds to it as well. And because again, just harking back, all these players are fairly new to Celtic. They don't know what Celtic is about. This is a must-win game tomorrow. And every game they're now playing is a must-win game. That's a lot of pressure, particularly for some of the younger players coming into this. And that's why it's good. Maybe Forrest is coming back. Maybe Julian's coming back. Juranovic is coming back. More experienced players who can cope with that kind of pressure. Because that's what you don't see as a fan, and maybe don't understand as a fan what the pressure must be like to have to face that. So I think we're in for a tough game tomorrow. I'm a wee bit concerned about tomorrow. Following the Aberdeen game, I'm a bit concerned. Yeah, but hopefully we can do it.
Yeah, I totally agree about the standard of Aberdeen. I mean, I'd heard that they hadn't played well this season, but I was really shocked at the level of their play. Like, I'd heard so many good things. Obviously, they'd got Scott Brown in, they'd got Ramirez in, they'd get Declan Gallagher in. I was expecting a much stronger opposition from them, and when we didn't get it, I was shocked and kind of surprised at the level of it. Russell, your opinion on going to Fir Park? Obviously, it's another away game for us. It's a situation in which we've struggled before. Jim alluded to the fact that it might be, back and forth. Do you see the game going that way? Will it be a tighter affair than that? Do you think there will be less goals, or do you think it'll be that gung-ho style we've become used to this season?
Dare I say it might be a slobber knocker tomorrow? You never know. I agree with Jim, to be honest with you. I think it could well up end to end. I think Motherwell's attacking prowess with Tony Watt and that striker whose name evades me, I think they are looking pretty lethal. Tony Watt was getting mentioned perhaps even a Scotland call-up, such as his form been. He seems to have found a club where he's actually going to have some sort of longevity at, which is good. Because you always want to see, ex-Celtic players that have given you fantastic memory, perhaps. You always want to see them do well, though. Do you know what I mean? As for, Graham Alexander's went in there, I think he's pretty unassuming. And then before you know it, not much expectation of Motherwell this season, potentially maybe pushing for a top 6 spot. Now they find themselves, after the last international break, still ahead of Celtic on merit. Not with games in hand or anything, or with us with games in hand or anything like that. So it's a task we've got to take seriously. But at the end of the day, with the resources we've got available to us, the quality we're going to have in the park, it really should be all about Celtic and what we do. And if we play to our capabilities, then we should win the match. If this was a European match that Celtic were up against a big giant, the disparity would probably be lesser than what it is between our wage budget and Motherwell's. Right, because we've got players on 20 times the wages that they will. We don't play. A lot of the teams we play don't have players on 20 times the wages, and yet still get the better of us in Europe. So I think there's a disparity there in terms of the resources, in terms of the tools. I think we're on a positive note from the result at Aberdeen. It's about what Celtic do. Let's go get 3 points. We'll need it.
I think also, Laura, the fact that they went to Ibrox and took a point from Ibrox, and they're playing us, and we're, as I said, not firing all cylinders. From a confidence point of view, they'll be very confident tomorrow.
Yeah, I think they will be. Duncan Cameron on YouTube says Celtic should not ever have anything to fear from Motherwell. I do agree, Duncan, but as Jim, Russell and I have said, I think there's plenty evidence to suggest that we should be cautious. But yeah, a Celtic team should always be confident against Motherwell, and we will go into it hoping for a win. But we have to, because as Jim says, every game is a must-win game this season.
I don't think it's about fear, Lola. I don't think anything's about fear. I mean, I think you're just realistically looking at the situation and saying, where are we? We're a point behind them. They're playing with confidence. So will it be a hard game? I think it will be. Hopefully it won't be. Hopefully we win the game quite convincingly. But you're just looking at the facts and saying, we are where we are, they're where they are, and therefore it's going to be a tough game. But nothing to do with fear. I mean, nobody fears games.
There's not going to be any Lions in there, is there?
Unless we're going to Barcelona or PSG, then you fear, 7-goal drubbings. That's a different thing. But
that's true. Tony Watt is no Neymar, I'll give him that. But talking of Tony Watt, Jim, and Russell talked about it, he seems to have found a home at Motherwell. He seems to be living up to some of that potential that we talked about. I was there on that night in 2012 when he gave us the memory that Russell alludes to, that goal against Barcelona. I'm sure you were there as well. And I remember that night them saying to him, kind of questions along the lines of, is this going to be the biggest moment of your career? And he, obviously a young 19-year-old as he was at the time, he didn't think so, but it turns out that it might have been. What do you think it is about him that, that he maybe didn't fit in at Celtic and has struggled to find a home? And what do you think it is about Motherwell that seems to be suiting him so well?
I don't know, you had lots of stories which we wouldn't go into today, but I just think he's one of these guys where, as a Celtic fan, you're desperate for some young Scottish guy. I know he didn't come through the academy and signed him from Airdrie, was it? For 50 grand or something. You're desperate for young Scottish guys to play up front and score goals. That's what you want. That's your kind of people like me who have seen lots of things. You go back to the days of Charlie Nicholas, stuff like that, and people were so excited when Charlie Nicholas was in the team. Young guys scoring goals, dead glamorous, good fun. Stay here forever, Charlie, and he leaves really quick. And since those days, we've been desperate for somebody, young guy coming through the system. I mean, he scored that night against Barcelona. You're thinking he could be it. He could be here for the next 4 or 5 years, scoring goals for fun. If you score against Barcelona, there's no reason why you can't go to Firth Park and score goals. So he was so keen for him to do well, and for whatever reason, it didn't quite work out for him. And that's, that's football for you. I mean, football is a very competitive game. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of people who never make it, who are a lot better than Tony Watt. So, it's just your luck at times. Maybe some injuries, maybe not getting picked in certain games. And I've said before, one moment can change a game, one game can change a season, one moment could actually change a life. Tony Watt came from nowhere to score that goal, and who knows, that could have just went and made him go. He didn't go. He went kind of like sideways and down a wee bit, type of thing. But who knows how these things work out? But I'm sure. I mean, football is littered with football players who should have been, better than they were, achieved more than they did, and maybe a lot of that just comes down to luck. So we'll never really know the answer to that, and maybe Tony himself doesn't actually know the answer to that. It's just, that's life at times,
I'm sure he probably doesn't know the answer, but yeah, I think he's. I think even with that goal, he's probably had a better career than he would have had without it. He's had some opportunities in Belgium and that kind of thing that raised his profile, and like you say, changed his life for the better, even if it didn't work out at Celtic. Russell, what are your memories of Tony Watt in a Celtic shirt, and what do you see in him now? Is he the same player that you've seen previously? I remember him having a great first touch and great pace as well as the finishing. But, he does seem a little bit of a different player now. What's your assessment on that?
I remember being at Firth Park when he scored 2 against Motherwell for Celtic. So hopefully that's not an omen, Laura. And his finishing was excellent then. I always remember thinking he was dead calm in front of goal. Dead calm for someone so young, and I thought that would stand him in good stead. My genuine opinion on Tony Watt is he's took chances, and there's 2 sides to that. You've got to admire it in a way. I can't remember the Belgian team, that he initially went to, but his form was so good. Was it Charleroi? Might have been. I don't know how to pronounce that. I was winging that.
He played,
no idea.
He played for Charleroi and Standard Liège in Belgium.
Standard Liège came in from after one season because, they're one of the big guns, and because he'd impressed that much. I think he did a decent spell at Charlton as well, and he was bought by or loaned to several clubs in the English Championship, sort of League One. He was, which is a decent standard. You don't get moves to these clubs, for nothing. I think there's always been a player there. I just think he's never settled. I think he's obviously got quite a strong personality. Maybe there's good traits to that. Maybe there's some bad. I don't know because I don't know him at all. So sometimes it just can be the thing is with Motherwell, he's getting regular first team football. So he's feeling, wanted. He's feeling part of it. He's been playing as captain as well. He's also came to an age in his life where he's married now. He's maybe got, I don't know if he's got kids or that, but he's at an age in his life where maturity takes over. It'll be interesting to see how he does in the next couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised to see him leave a Motherwell and go to maybe, I think he's been at Hearts before, maybe at a Hearts or an Aberdeen or a Hibs. Just slightly that wee bit of a bit bigger budget and a team that can maybe compete for Europe regular. I'm not saying Motherwell can, I just mean, you know what I mean? Like if there was a tier above Motherwell, but not Celtic and, and Rangers, whatever, you would say Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen would sort of be in the bracket. It wouldn't be, beyond the realms of possibility that he could maybe make that step up, whether it be, maybe next summer or something like that. But he's definitely something we need to have an eye on Sunday, anyway.
I think also, Laura, that 90% of football is mental. It's down to how you think. And the high he must have been on from scoring that goal against Barcelona and thinking, what happens next with me? And then all of a sudden, he's going all around Europe playing for different teams. He's down south. And that's very unsettling. So you must wonder, am I ever going to make it in this kind of game? I could have been this, now I'm this. So, tough times when you're actually playing for all these different teams. Maybe not even playing from the start. Maybe you're a sub and thinking, am I ever going to get a game? And I think he has found a place in Motherwell where he looks pretty settled. And as Russell said, if he's now married and kind of settling down a bit, and obviously he's older as well. And once you're older, then you've seen a lot of things. Once you're older, then you do become a wee bit smarter and you do look at the bigger picture and all this sort of stuff, and you do welcome and appreciate things you maybe didn't do before. So maybe he's just a wee bit more mature now. Yeah. And I totally agree with Russell. I think he could do a job for a much bigger team, including us. Yeah, including us.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe there's a homecoming on the cards, another Cristiano Ronaldo type, although not quite the same.
Well, I think we could have done much worse at the start of the season, because at the start of the season, I felt it'd be good to get a number of ex-Celts in, because these had bodies, and then at least you would know what you were getting. I thought people like Charlie Mulgrew, for instance, I know a lot of people would be saying no, never, but I thought he'd be somebody who, he could play him left back, he could play him centre back, he's experienced, good free kick, and one or two others. Maybe Tony Watt is maybe somebody that, and I know a lot of fans would can balk at that, but we compare Tony Watt to a Yeti, say, so anyway, that's in the past.
I think there's certainly something in that. I don't think he'd be the worst option for us. I'm just sitting here panicking that this is going to get clipped up, and I've just compared Tony Watt to Cristiano Ronaldo. But there you go. Pat O on YouTube says Tony Watt is just Mark Burchill with less embarrassing hair. I don't know what was up with Mark Burchill's hair. I thought he was well kempt, to be honest. But scored against Rangers. That's all I'm bothered about. So. Going back to the earlier point that four trebles brought up, and Jim, you mentioned it earlier about James McCarthy. A lot of people seem to think he might start tomorrow just because of options that might be restricted because of the international football and things. You mentioned earlier he's not had a chance to fully show what he's about in a Celtic shirt yet. What do you think the reasons might be behind that?
I think there's lots of reasons behind that. I think maybe getting up to fitness is one. I think getting used to playing for Celtic is another one. And what I've said in previous podcasts, we need every single player to be a 7 out of 10 in every single game. And if you're not, if you're not a 7 out of 10, we should have enough players now to start making those changes. So I don't mind starting James McCarthy, but if he's not performing at the level we need to, then we need to do something different from that. I'm not a big James McCarthy fan. I haven't seen enough yet, and I've never seen enough of James McCarthy in the past. I mean, I think I remember seeing him playing at Hamilton, which was a long, long time ago. So I think that's unfair of me just to make that comment. But there's been 2 or 3 times this season when I felt he goes back a bit too much for me. And then one of the talking points about the Dundee United game was the penalty they should have got. And then people said, but Starfelt get fouled. But who passed the ball back to him? Didn't pass the ball back to him. He fired the ball at Starfelt. It was James Carthy. So, I think he's got a bit to go. I'd like to see him make it at Celtic. He's on a long-term contract. But I think he's one of these players, and I'm just guessing here, that we needed bodies in. And if you look at what he's done in the game, and you're Ange Postecoglou, you might think, well, he's got a decent, a decent pass record. Get him in, get Joe Hart in, get Starfelt in. I'm not sure a lot of these guys are bad as well. I need to put that in. I'm not sure that a lot of these guys are Ange signings, but if we didn't sign players, then we're going to go with 19-year-old centre-halves. So I think you had to get people in the door. Whether James McCarthy is one of his players, I'm not so sure. Because I'm not so sure also, does he play the type of fast-moving type of football that Ange wants to play? He's another one of these guys you may want to bring on to kind of shore up a game. So we've got all these subs who you bring on to shore up the game. So I think he's got a bit to go, James McCarthy, and I'd love him to make it. He's obviously a big Celtic fan, and you want him to make it. And he's done enough in the past to show that he should be able to make it. And he's got a 4-year contract. So he needs to start putting in 7 out of 10 performances on a consistent basis. And he needs to play 30, 35, 40 games a season. Because he'll be on big money. Like one of the highest paid players at the club. He needs to perform. So I don't think he'll play tomorrow. I think he'll stick with Beaton again. But as far as James McCarthy question goes, he needs to start performing.
Yeah, absolutely. He does, and hopefully he will. Robert Heinlein on YouTube says, let's bring back Bertie Auld, which I'm sure you'd be a fan of, Jim. Speaking of which, I believe your play, Bend It Like Bertie's got another night coming up in November, is that right?
Shameless plug, we're back on the 13th of November, one night only, at the Beacon Arts Centre in Greenock. So I believe tickets are selling really well. So it's a one night only. So, be there, be square, as we said in the 60s. So there you go.
Absolutely. So if you live around that area or you fancy a wee road trip to Greenock...
It's not that far away. Greenock's just down the road. Just down the road.
Go for it. I've heard good reports about Bend It Like Bertie from everybody that went when it was on up in Glasgow, so I'm sure it would be a night to remember. Des McLean's a genius, so go down and see Des McLean's a genius. Absolutely. That's definitely something for folk to do, especially now we're allowed out and doing
also, it's on an international break, so no Celtic, no problem. Get down there for your Celtic fix. There you go.
There you go. The planning is immaculate there. That's absolutely fantastic.
But don't just throw this together. It's all meticulously planned out. Absolutely.
Russell, we've got not only the Motherwell game coming up, we're going to be playing in Europe again against Ferencváros coming up. Looking ahead a little bit to the Europa League, what are you hoping to get out of Europe now that, between now and Christmas, we're going to know exactly where we stand as far as Europe's concerned? Are you looking for qualification from the group? The conference, is that an option? Do you think we can get either of those, or is it just good performances you're looking for?
Well, I think this is where people tie themselves up in knots with the whole Europe argument discussion, because on one hand, you were hearing Europe was a free pass this year. We needed to focus on the league. The league wasn't going right, and we decided that, we should. If we take Europe seriously, then the league will follow. I think we need to take both competitions as seriously as each other. I don't see any reason why Celtic can't finish second in that group, whether they've lost the first 2 matches or not. We need to try. I appreciate everything that Kev McCluskey said yesterday when he came on the show and gave us even more insight into Friday, as they're called over there. He says there'll be absolutely no pushovers, but Celtic's budget, I'm sure, is bigger than Friday's, and I think that we have to be looking to get 6 points from the next 2 games. Betis, we've seen the chinks in their armour, albeit, yes, they went when they scored their 4 goals in a row. We looked, like we were on our backs. They were all over us. But we did see enough chinks in their armour to think that at home, surely if we took a 2-0 lead early on again, for example, I'm not saying that that's necessarily going to happen, but for example, if we were to, you'd like to think at home with the fans on our side, we would just be a bit tighter and we wouldn't just, completely spontaneously combust like we did over in Seville. But I think that, and even the Leverkusen game, I mean, that's probably the least likely, but I still think we should be going for second and trying to remain in the Europa League, and at the very least, dropping into the Conference League. Before you know it, people's expectations are getting lowered all the time, and that is my concern, Laura, that we start continually lowering expectations, and before you know it, it's, well, as long as we finish second in the conference group next season, that'll be all right, and I can't even bother with that. I want the club to recognise that the last 9 years, they've made an absolute mess of getting in to the Champions League when they had the Champions route 9 years in a row and they made it 3 times. It's not a good enough ratio. It should have been 5, 6 times. I think it would be more palatable for me. And if you've done that, then that means the years that you don't make it, the Europa League's easier to compete in because the club is far more cash rich. It has attracted better players in the first place, and it all follows on from that. It's a snowball effect. Whereas right now, if we keep lowering these expectations, I worry that downsizing continues, and the product we see on the pitch gets lesser and lesser. And again, if we're to start, aspiring for third place in the Europa League, I find that a wee bit of a concern, if I'm honest with you. We've got to be going for the second spot at the very least.
Yeah. Jim, you've been a total component of Europe being where it's at, Europe being the sign of progression. Domestically, we can do everything that we can, but ultimately we have the resources that domestic football should take care of itself. So I take it you're mostly in agreement with what Russell's saying as far as those targets are concerned?
A total component. I was wondering where you were going with that there, but that's okay, that's fine. As someone who's seen lots of things, European game at 3:30 on Tuesday afternoon is completely and utterly bonkers. The world has gone mad, basically, to have to go to that game on Tuesday afternoon, people taking time off work, etc., etc. Russell's a bit more optimistic than I am. I think we're in a dogfight for that conference slot, so we can hear what the conference theme tune sounds like. I think Betis will have too much for us and Bayer have got too much for us. And although it pains me to say this, I think we're in a dogfight with them. And as Kevin said yesterday, this crowd will no pushovers. They push Betis and they push Bayer. They push Bayer much closer than we did. So I think it'll be a tough game on Tuesday. Again, another one of these games that might be a draw, settled by a goal type thing. And similar when we go there, it'll be pretty similar. But I just think the other teams are going to be just a bit too strong. I think they'll put enough points on the board that we'll end up being third. And if we could take 4 points off Ferencváros over the 2 games, I think maybe that should be enough, hopefully, to get us that conference place. But the whole thing is bizarre that, you chucked out the Champions League, you go in Europa, you chuck out Europa, you're in the conference, and what's next? Dalkeith, so, it's kind of, whole thing's a wee bit mad for me, but I still can't get my head around this 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. That's just, every season something happens in football and you think, no, that can't be right. Next year's World Cup in December, no, that can't be right. So it's just, we are where we are and all that stuff. But as someone who's seen a lot of football over a lot of time, you just keep thinking, if somebody had suggested this, 20, 30 years ago, they'd be saying, don't be silly. But it's just the way things are worked out. But to answer the question, I think we'll do well to make the conference because I think there'll be two tough games against Ferencváros, and I think the other teams are just a wee bit too much quality for both ourselves and Ferencváros, and that's not been fearful, as the person said earlier. I think that's just been kind of realistic, and I do think Europe's where it's at. I think we should be building a team for Europe. Another thing, maybe just to mention, now it's suddenly occurred to me, is that the most important date in the football calendar for Celtic should be our first Champions League qualifier. Everything should be geared to that. We should have the squad in place, the management in place, and everything in place to give it a go. And if we fail, we fail. But everything should be there. And I've heard people talk about the January window, and maybe we might do this, maybe we don't. We should have a firm plan in what we're doing in January, because we have to give the Champions League a decent go next year if we don't qualify automatically, which we've still a good chance of doing. But what was the question? Conference League for me, yeah. Conference League, yeah. That's the way it is.
Yeah, it's a strange one just to close out, Russell. I think everything that Jim says there is right, and as he said many times before, a Scottish team that's regularly competing in the Champions League and having the funds that brings and the player quality that brings, you almost don't need to worry about the domestic football if you are taking care of the European football, because one hand washes the other, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's why we shouldn't be looking at any European campaign as a free pass. Couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jim and Russell. I nearly said Jim and Tony out of habits there, but Tony has obviously been in London as well. Jim and Russell, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you to everybody in the comments. Almost couldn't read out most of them. We were getting so many of them scrolling through it, and that is just a testament again to everybody watching this show who voted for us and made us the best international podcast, best club content podcast, and a bronze medal in the best charitable campaign. We can't thank you enough for bringing those awards our way. We hope that the content we're providing for you is worthy of those awards, and hopefully we'll be able to bring you much more over the next year. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, everybody. This has been a Celtic State of Mind, and we will see you for the match coverage this weekend.